All right, we are back with another calisthenics video. So I'm super stoked to be able to film more calisthenics content. And today I thought what we'd do is a bit of a calisthenics 101. Essentially, I want this video to be a really good resource if you're a complete beginner into what calisthenics is, what the main exercises are, and also some of the progressions that you can use around your home for those exercises. But also I'll suggest some equipment along the way that might be beneficial to your journey if calisthenics is something that you're looking to get into. So first, I guess it kind of makes sense to explain what calisthenics is. You might know that if you've ended up on this video, but if you're like me, when I started, I had absolutely no clue what calisthenics was or how to even pronounce the word. But essentially, calisthenics is body weight exercise in all its forms. The actual word calisthenics comes from Greek origin, and it means beautiful strength, which totally makes sense when you watch some people that are really good at calisthenics do the movements, because they kind of make it look like gravity doesn't even exist, which is amazing to watch, but it also lulls you into a false sense of security that it's super easy to do these exercises because they look so effortless. Whereas, take it from me, they definitely do not feel that way. However, calisthenics is so much fun and is such a passion of mine now, as well as having so many pros. Like, you can do it anywhere, you only need your own body, and you can be really inventive with it as well, which I totally love. One other aspect of calisthenics that I think really stood out to me, especially when I was a beginner and helped me stay consistent with my journey, is that there's a really good and encouraging community in calisthenics. Everybody just wants everyone else to succeed, and whether someone's been doing it for their entire lives and is really, really advanced, or someone who's just starting out, there is always a mutual respect for the fact that everyone is working towards something. Now, that being said, I do think it's always important with calisthenics to talk about expectations of how long it's going to take to learn exercises, because let me tell you, progress can be slow, like excruciatingly slow. It took me over a year to learn how to do a full push-up on my toes from not being able to do one, and even then the form was a little bit sketchy. And similarly, learning a pull-up took me a long time, and the journey from then has been up and down because I've had injuries, I've had periods where I've not been able to train. However, don't worry, it does get easier as time goes on. Now, I mention this because I feel like it can be quite off-putting for some people, thinking that they're not making progress when in fact they are, but perhaps it's just not as quick or as obvious as it is with other styles of training. My advice would always be, as long as you stay consistent, keep working through your progressions and track your progress as much as possible in different ways, then you are definitely going to get there in the end. You just have to stay committed. Now, because we're using our body weight and we don't really have any solid metrics to see whether we're progressing, I would always advise taking as many videos as possible. This will help you immeasurably, not only in looking back when you've been able to achieve an exercise and seeing how far you've come from, but also being able to see if you are making progress. Because the changes can be so minuscule week on week that you might not notice it when you're in the movement, but if you can review footage, you can see that your form has improved, maybe you've just increased the depth of your push-up, for example, or you might feel like the RPE is a little bit easier. With calisthenics, and I would argue most forms of training, if you want to get good at it, focus on quality over quantity. Work on getting that first push-up or that first chin-up, and then start to progress from there. As you work through the progressions, really focus on the correct form and feeling super strong in that movement before you move on to the next progression. But most importantly, always remember to have fun. Calisthenics is about moving your body, seeing what you're capable of, and yes, things may take time, but you also might surprise yourself. And I can tell you, there is nothing better than when you achieve something for the first time. It is probably one of the best feelings. So stick with it, but make sure you have fun. Okay, so let's get stuck into the actual exercises. So with calisthenics, we have around 5 or 6 kind of core exercises that we use to progress from. So once you master these core exercises, you can use those to build up new skills and work towards advancing everything that you're doing. So we're looking at push-ups, pull-ups or chin-ups, depending on which grip you're using. We've got dips, squats, we've got a core exercise or a hip hinge movement, and then you could add in a posterior chain movement, which is all the muscles down the back, such as a glute bridge, hip thrust, that type of thing. So I'm going to run you through all of these exercises from a beginner's perspective, so don't worry if you have never done calisthenics before, if you don't have any equipment, if you're brand new to it, if you've never trained before in your life, none of that matters. There will always be a progression for you and your level. So we're going to go through those exercises, and I'll also give you some form cues as well. So by the end of this video, you have a bit of an idea of where you are and what you can do to start working towards these movements. I guess we should start with probably the big one, the one that people always want to achieve, which is pull-ups and chin-ups. So let's go over to the bar and have a quick discussion. All right, so if you're a beginner, I doubt you're gonna have a squat rack with a pull-up bar in your living room like I do, but don't worry, neither did I when I started out. In fact, I just started out with some progressions that didn't even need a bar at all, which I'm gonna show you in a second. And then eventually, as I got a little bit stronger, I invested in a door-mounted pull-up bar. It was about $12 from Kmart, and it was probably the best thing because every time I would walk past the door that it was on, I would try and hang on it, I would try and do a pull-up on it or whatever I could, and eventually over time that really helped. In fact, that style of training is called greasing the groove, so you could check that out if you want a little bit more information. But it's a really good way of training if you're trying to learn something for the first time. When we're learning pull-ups or chin-ups, a really great exercise is to do a bodyweight row. Now I'm going to show you that movement on this piece of equipment, and then I'm going to give you some suggestions to how you could potentially do this at home if you are just starting out. But of course, if you have access to a gym, you'll be able to do a setup like this, and they have a low bar, which is between chest and waist height. You'll be able to do this exercise as well. And it's a really great exercise for building up that strength for pull-ups. So what you're gonna do is find a bar. Like I say, it's gonna be between your chest and your waist height. The lower the bar, the harder this exercise will be. So over time, what we'd want to see is dropping the height of the bar that you're working from. And in doing so, you're increasing the difficulty of the exercise. So you're gonna come under the bar, fingers are gonna go over it in this circumstance, and you're just gonna step down and hang under the bar here. And the aim is simply just to pull your chest towards the bar, keeping your elbows relatively close to your body, squeezing at the top, and then coming down. Now you want to try and keep your body in a one long line, so rather than having it down here or arching your back like this, try to keep nice and strong throughout the entire body, keep that tension there, and then pull yourself to the bar, control that movement, and then slowly release yourself all the way back down. Now another way to do this exercise is to use one of these suspension systems. Now you can buy these online, they're reasonably cheap and you can do quite a lot with them, but you can also find them in pretty much any gym nowadays as well. And exactly the same rules apply. You're just going to come underneath by holding the handles, and then from here what you want to do is bring your elbows close to your body, chest comes towards the handles, arms to the side of your chest, and then release yourself back down, nice and controlled. Now, one other option is rings. As a beginner, these can be really useful, but I would suggest other items over these initially. However, they are a lot of fun, and they're definitely going to be beneficial to your training as you progress through calisthenics. So for a relatively cheap price, you can invest in rings. It's up to you, but I would suggest maybe a little bit down the track. So if you're in a commercial gym, you could use a Smith machine, or you can use a squat rack like I am to set this up. However, you might not have access to a gym, and in that case, what you can do is if you can find a sturdy table or a decent bench, you could use that to do rows on instead. All the same cues apply, so you're going to bring your chest to the top and then let yourself down nice and slowly and control that movement. Now, if you are brand new to calisthenics and struggling with strength a little bit, you can actually do these on a door frame as well. Again, all the same cues apply. You're going to think about bringing your chest towards your hands, getting that nice squeeze, and then lowering yourself in a nice controlled manner. Now, bodyweight rows are a fantastic exercise, but eventually you're going to want to add on to that. And what I would suggest is doing leg-assisted chin-ups or pull-ups. Now, I keep mentioning chin-ups versus pull-ups. It's just essentially the grip that makes the difference. So if you have an overhand grip, so your fingers are going over the bar, that's going to be a pull-up. And if your fingers are going under the bar, that's going to be a chin-up. Honestly, I would suggest as a beginner, just do what's more comfortable for you. The majority of people will find chin-ups a little bit easier initially, just because there's more emphasis on your bicep muscle and the anterior chain, which we tend to use a little bit more in day-to-day life, so is stronger than our posterior chain, which we use a little bit more in pull-ups. However, again, this is not always set in stone. So I would suggest just do what feels right for you, and there's always plenty of time in the future to work on both, but there is definitely a crossover between it. So if you're training chin-ups, you're still gonna be making progress with pull-ups. So for our leg assisted work, what we're going to do is have our hands just outside of our shoulders. We're going to come directly under the bar, but keep our feet on the floor. And then from there, we're going to simply pull our elbows back towards our back pockets. Think about maybe bending that bar and bring your chest towards the top of the bar. Hold yourself there for a second and then slowly lower back down. Now this is emulating the movement of a pull-up, so we're simply just going to be doing that, but by having our feet on the floor, we're supporting some of our body weight, which makes it a little bit easier. Now, the more weight that you do put through your feet, the easier this exercise is going to be. So the idea would be over time, you minimize how much weight is in your foot. So those progressions are all well and good, but eventually we're going to want to get up onto the bar. Now, like I say, you're probably not going to have this piece of equipment in your living room like I do. Obviously, I think it's a great investment, but it's something that you'll probably want to make down the track. You can always grab yourself one of those door-mounted ones. Loads of places sell them. You can get them on Amazon. I got mine in Australia in Kmart, and they pretty much attach to any door frame. However, most gyms and parks also have these, and you can find some things around the house that work as well. But essentially, if you're a beginner, I would suggest trying to get onto the bar as quickly as possible. And to start with, all you're going to do is simply hang. So we would call this a passive hang. You're simply going to grip it with your hands just slightly wider than your shoulders, and you're just going to hang on the bar. You don't have to do anything at all, just hang on the bar and start to build up that grip strength. At first, you might not even be able to hold on for 1 second, but what you want to do is slowly build up that time, and you will notice that your grip strength will improve, and it will help you immeasurably when you start to be able to do pull-ups. From there, a fantastic exercise to add in is scapular pull-ups. Again, this isn't easy, especially when you're starting out, but it's something to start working on when you feel confident too. So you're going to grip the bar with your hands slightly wider than your shoulders and completely hang passively. So you're going to let your shoulder blades come completely apart. And then from there, it's a very small movement, but what you want to do is essentially come up and squeeze your shoulder blades together. Hold it for 1 second and then come back down to where we started, and then you just repeat from there. Essentially in this movement, we're building up the strength needed for that initial part of the pull-up, which tends to be the hardest part for a lot of people. So it's great to work on that while you're also working on other progressions, so it'll make chin-ups and pull-ups easier when you start progressing towards them. So the final progression I'm going to show you for chin-ups and pull-ups is going to be banded ones. Now, I'm sure you've seen bands, but they're a fantastic tool and one that I use pretty much every day. Not only do they make some exercises easier, but they can also be used to make exercises harder, to assist you, and also for your warm-up and mobility as well. So with a band, you're essentially going to loop it around the top of the bar. You're going to place your foot into it, and this is essentially going to assist you by reducing some of the body weight that you have to pull. So the thicker the band, the more assistance it's going to give you, and you can slowly progress by making the band thinner until you can do body weight. So you're going to grip the bar. I like to put both feet in, but if you don't feel secure enough with your strength, then you can just leave one foot out for security. And then from here, everything else is the same. So you're going to grip the bar nice and hard. Think about bending the bar in half. Engage your scapula at the bottom. You're going to keep your core nice and strong, and then you're going to think about bringing your elbows towards your back pockets and your chest to the bar. Hold it for 1 second at the top, and then slowly release yourself down. Again, remember quality over quantity. So if you can only do one good rep, do that, have a rest, come back and do another one. Now, there are tons of other progressions for pull-ups and chin-ups. I'm not going to go through any more in this video. I actually have a separate video all about pull-ups and a pull-up program on my app as well. I just don't want to go through every progression, otherwise this video is going to be like at least 2 hours long. So I'm going to leave it there because this video is aimed at beginners. But those are the ones that you're going to focus on to get yourself started with your bar skills and working on quality reps over quantity. Okay, so next up we're going to talk about push-ups. Now, if you want to learn push-ups, I have a whole separate video on it, and I would definitely suggest checking that out because I go into a lot more detail about form cues and different progressions that you can use, and maybe some of the things that you should avoid as well. However, I'm going to give you a quick overview in this video. Now, when we often think of progressions for push-ups, what you'll normally see is knee push-ups. That looks something like this. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with doing knee push-ups, there are some limitations, and I would always suggest that incline push-ups are going to be much better. Now, to give you a brief overview as to why, if you do push-ups on your knees, from here, the next progression, once you feel proficient at these, is to go up onto your toes, and that's quite a significant jump in how much strength is required. However, if you do an incline push-up, you can slowly lower the height of what you're pushing from, and that means that the jumps and progressions are just a little bit smaller and a bit more achievable. So for an incline push-up, you're going to find something, literally anything that you can push off. Now, obviously, it depends on your current strength or your experience and what you're going to choose. I personally started out on a wall, and I was essentially standing upright and pushing it, And I even found that a struggle. But over time, as I lowered the surface that I was pushing from, I got proficient at pushing from the floor. So some surfaces that you could work from are things like the wall. You might have a kitchen counter or a banister that you can use, the side of your bathtub or the back of your sofa. Obviously, I'm going to use a box today, and again, most beginners aren't going to have a plyometric box. Although a very useful piece of equipment, they're not going to have one of these again in their living room, but it's going to show you the form, and again, there are so many things around your house that you can use. You can also use things such as a stair, a stool, a TV unit, a coffee table, literally the options are endless. So for incline push-ups, what you want to do is place your hands onto the surface. If you find that it's a little bit painful where you're pushing from, just put a mat or a towel underneath your hands. They're going to be just slightly wider than your shoulder. You don't want them too wide at all. And then you're going to step back into a high plank position. From there, and you'll see a regular theme here, you're going to bring your chest down between your hands and then push back up. Now you want to bring your elbows about 45 degrees from your body or slightly closer. Try to avoid them flaring out like this. If you find that this is happening, then you could probably increase the height from which you're pushing. Make sure you feel confident with the form there and then lower the surface again after a little bit of time. One tip to avoid with push-ups is thinking about bringing your head down. This is something that we often see. We want to stay in a nice long line here, keep that core nice and strong and engaged, and then think about bringing your chest between your thumbs and push back up. Once you feel like you can do several sets of 6 to 8 reps of push-ups, you're going to lower the surface that you're pushing from and then keep continuing to do that until you can essentially go down to the floor. Once you hit the floor, doing a full push-up in this position can still be quite challenging. So one fantastic training tool is called negatives or eccentrics. Now using this training style allows you to work on building strength but also managing your form. So what you really want to focus on is having good strict form and coming down in a nice and controlled way all the way to the bottom and then coming back up again. So that is essentially push-ups, a well worthwhile endeavor, something that I absolutely love to do. But like I said, if you want any more information, definitely go and check out the push-up video. I'll link all these videos down below so you can get some more ideas on progressions that you can use, the right form, and some things that maybe you'd like to avoid. Okay, so let's move on to the exercise I love to hate, which is dips. Okay, so dips are another pushing exercise, which are one of the fundamentals in calisthenics. Predominantly, we're going to be using our chest muscles, our triceps, and also our anterior shoulders. Now, if you have absolutely no equipment at home, bodyweight tricep dips are going to be a decent option for you. Again, this is where I started out because we don't all have access to parallel bars in our homes. So to start out with tricep dips, you're going to find a surface that you can push from. This needs to be between knee and hip height when you're standing. And from here, you're going to place the heels of your hands just slightly wider than your shoulders and come into essentially a seated position. From here, you're going to bend your elbows to 90 degrees. You're going to try and aim to go straight down rather than coming forwards. You want to try and go down towards the floor with your bum. Elbows are pointing towards the back of the room, and then from here, you're going to push back up and just get a nice squeeze in that tricep muscle here, which is this one on the back of your arm. Now this exercise looks quite easy, but honestly, if you start to do quite a few reps of it, it starts to get more challenging. But as you want to progress it, you can simply do that by extending your feet out, meaning that you're putting more body weight through your arms and still doing the same movement. Okay, so more traditionally, when we talk about dips in calisthenics, we think about body weight dips on parallel bars. Now, these high parallettes are actually really useful because not only can you do dips on them, but you can do body weight rows, you can do some core exercises as well as a few other things as well. So they're quite handy to have at home. But again, it's unlikely that a beginner is going to have these. So you might want to stick to the body weight dips I just showed you, or you can fashion this out of 2 dining chairs. The only issue you might have is a bit of instability. Again, check out my dips video if you want a bit more information on how to set that up. And we can also use the eccentrics that I was talking about with the push-ups. So I'm going to show you what those look like. Essentially, to set this up, you're going to have your hands by your hips and you're going to keep your legs on the floor for leg-assisted dips. I'm just going to step back a little bit so I can get the movement in. From here, what you want to do is bend your elbows and bring your chest down slightly forwards. Once you hit about parallel to the floor with your upper arm, you're going to push back up and then squeeze that tricep at the top. Now, throughout the entire movement, you want to keep your core nice and strong. You want to basically keep everything tense. Now, when I talk about core engagement, what I want you to think about is creating some abdominal pressure. So we call it intra-abdominal pressure. Essentially, you want to think of yourself like a can of fizzy pop that's been shaken up, and you can feel that pressure that's coming and pushing to the outside of the can. Or another way I like to think about it is if someone's going to come punch you in the stomach and you're going to tense up, that's the feeling that you want to be doing throughout every single exercise. So often we think about sucking our bellies in and trying to look as small as possible while we're doing it, but actually what we want to do is push out the pressure and create some tension to give us that strength and stability. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create that tension. We're going to bend our elbows, bring our chest forward. Once we hit this point, we're going to push back up. And again, the more weight that you have in your feet, the easier this exercise is going to be. If you've watched any of my other calisthenics videos, Hugo nearly always makes an appearance. He just can't help himself, but he's always a nice little addition to the video. Right, let's talk about the bands. So for the bands, I'm simply just going to hold a band over the bar and then loop my knees into the band and do the exact same movement. So hands are going to be just outside of my hips. I'm going to bend my elbows, bring my chest down. Try to keep your head not up like this necessarily, but not facing the ground. You just want it neutral, and then push back up. So you can work with the bands or you can work with eccentrics. Again, these are a hard progression, so this is going to take a little while to work up to, but a fantastic progression if you are working towards your dip. So everything else is going to be exactly the same. We're going to go down for between 4 to 8 seconds, and we're going to focus on our form and also building strength. When we get to the bottom, we're simply just going to put our feet on the ground and then come back to the top. So starting here, I'm going to go down for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Feet on the ground. Come back up. Now, one thing I will mention with eccentrics is that you should have a slightly longer rest time. This does put a lot of stress and strain on your muscles, so give them a good amount of time to recover so you can get the maximum out of this exercise. In terms of a number for rest time, I would suggest around 2 minutes between sets, whereas with banded or leg assisted, you could probably take about a minute. Honestly though, if you're a beginner, don't think too much about rest times. You always want to focus on that quality, so if you need to take a slightly longer rest time so that you can get good quality reps out, then I would 100% recommend doing that. So while a lot of people hate to admit it, there is lower body in calisthenics. Some people will add weight to their lower body training, but there is plenty that you can do when you're a beginner to work towards some skills which are kind of fun to work towards, like pistol squats and shrimp squats. So to start with, we're just going to focus on nailing the form on a simple body weight squat. So to do that, you're going to have your feet come about hips distance apart. You want to turn your toes out slightly, so towards the corners of the room, so that when you squat down, they're going in the same direction as your knees. You can have your hands wherever you want. If they're comfortable on your hips, that's totally fine. I have a bit of a habit of putting them in front of my chest like this. And then you're going to try to spread the weight in your feet, but if you want to think about having more of the weight in your heel, that's going to be beneficial. Create that intra-abdominal pressure that we were talking about. Keep your chest up nice and high. And then from here, you're just going to sit back. And then when you get to around parallel with the floor, you're going to push back up through your heels and come to a standing position. Now, it may look easy, but if you're a beginner, this might be a challenge. So you could put a stool or a seat behind you to sit back onto, and then when you get to the bottom, just push yourself back up. That might just give you the confidence that you're not going to fall over. And from here, we just want to work on building up the strength, building up the proprioception and the coordination and just the confidence in that movement. Once you feel like you can do it, you can always add a resistance band or you can hold a weight to make it a little bit harder. Eventually, we might want to move on to some unilateral movements so we can start working towards things like the pistol squat. And to do that, you can simply just grab yourself a seat. So this could be a dining chair, your coffee table, or even your sofa or just your bed. And from here, essentially what we're going to do is lift one foot up and just do single leg squats with the assistance of having this box here. So you're going to lift one foot off the floor. You can keep this leg bent. You don't need to worry about having it extended. You're going to sit back. When you get to the bottom, you're going to just push back up through that heel and come back up to standing. Now this is quite challenging, so if you find that you need the assistance, you can just put your hands down and just give yourself a little bit of a push off to get you up to that standing position. And then as you feel like you can progress, you can extend your leg out a little bit further and also lower the height to which you're sitting on. Some other fantastic exercises to work towards in terms of lower body in calisthenics is things like Cossack squats. So that is essentially a side lunge, but instead of stopping here, we go all the way to the floor and then push back up through our heel on both sides. Again, this one is quite challenging, but it also requires a bit of mobility work as well. So something to work towards. And one of my favorite exercises, which I feel like has such real world application, is simply doing step ups. So you can find yourself a step, a big book, a staircase, whatever you have, and just gonna simply step up onto it. You place your foot on that box. You want your weight to be in your heel. With as little momentum as possible, you're gonna step up onto that and then come back down in a controlled manner. I think I would suggest that exercise to literally anyone. So that's all I'm going to talk about in terms of lower body training. There's a couple of progressions there for you to work on, but I'll also link some videos down below if you want some more information. All right, so I'm going to finish this video off just talking through some of the core exercises that I would recommend incorporating into your training. So I'm just going to run through a couple and give you a few form cues. And we're going to start with the classic plank, the one that everyone loves to hate. So with a plank, you're going to set yourself up like you're going to do a push-up. So you're going to have your hands pretty much directly beneath your shoulders this time, and you're going to step back into a high plank position. Now, if this hurts your wrists, you can always do this on your elbows. There's absolutely no problem with that at all, and you're just going to stay here. You want to think about having a nice strong core. You've probably heard this 1,000,000 times, but think about having a nice long line between the top of your head and the heel of your foot. So when you're in this position, you want to avoid arching your back like this or sinking down low. If you find that this is happening, just think about tucking your tailbone under, pulling your belly button in a little bit, pushing up with your arms. And if you still struggle, just minimize the time, have a little bit of rest, and then come back. Because remember, quality over quantity always. Another really great exercise is a quad hold. So it's very similar in terms of its setup, but this time you're gonna have your knees come beneath your hips. You're gonna tuck your toes under. And from here, you're just gonna hover your knees about 1 inch off the floor. And you're gonna maintain this for as long as possible. Keeping a nice strong core and a neutral spine. It's a really great exercise for building up that core strength, which is always important in calisthenics. Now you can advance this quad hold by simply adding shoulder taps. You're adding that instability and that unilateral movement in, or you can do a leg lift, whatever you fancy. But the idea is you want to try and keep your knees at that same height and not let them come up too high or sink too low. Now I hate to admit it, but hollow body holds are a fantastic exercise. So to set yourself up for a hollow body hold, you're gonna lie flat on the floor. Now typically people will have a little bit of a gap between their lower back and the ground. So we wanna avoid this by bringing our hips up, tucking our tailbone under, and then squeezing our lower back into the ground. You can also think about your belly button being pulled into the ground, and then trying to keep that there as much as possible. It sounds easy, it is not easy, but that's what you wanna focus on. And then from here, there are loads of different options. Now, the full hollow body hold, where your arms are extended over your head and your legs are extended out in front of you, is gonna be the most difficult progression, and you can add on rocks and things like that from there. We're not gonna focus on that today. We wanna focus on trying to keep our lower back squeezed into that ground however possible. So to start with, you might find that having your knees stacked and your arms come out over your head is enough for you. From here, if you find that that's easy enough, then you can extend one leg out, or you can extend both legs out and give that a go. But essentially what we want to avoid is this lower back arching and coming off the ground. One final exercise that I do nearly every day and that you'll see in nearly all of my workouts is some form of back extension. It's super important not to forget the back of your body. And when we're talking about core, we're not just talking about our abs and our obliques. Our back also is a part of that. So we want to make sure that our entire trunk is nice and strong. We need that to keep us as protected as possible. So with back extensions, there are loads of different options. When you're starting out, you might simply want to just peel your chest off the ground. But then to make it a little bit harder, you can raise your feet off the ground, or you can add pulses. Obviously you can increase the time or the reps that you're doing. So to start with, you might be here, having your hands by your ears, and essentially you're just peeling your chest off the floor, squeezing back, and then coming back down. To then advance this, you might have your hands come out in front of you, keep them off the floor, extend up, could squeeze back, come forward, and back down. And again, like I mentioned, you can bring your feet off the floor to then increase it even more. So those are some of the core exercises that I think are really beneficial and nice and simple for anybody. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that video and it's given you a little bit of ideas, some things that you can work on if your goal is to get into calisthenics, which I 100% would recommend, but maybe I'm a little bit biased. If you want any more information, you can check out all the videos that I've linked down below. I also have heaps of different resources depending on what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve. I've got loads of free videos on YouTube about calisthenics, including stuff about my journey in calisthenics, which has been a little bit bumpy and maybe a bit unconventional. I also have beginner and intermediate ebooks. I have a workout app which is updated regularly, and of course I have one-to-one coaching, as well as I am a personal trainer. And I feel like I don't really say that ever, but I am a personal trainer. Those things are all nice. You don't need any of that. And if you're like me, you can just start by playing around at home and seeing what your body is capable of, and who knows where it will take you. I'll also link down below some other people who have calisthenics channels which I think are beneficial or good resources as well for you. All we want to do is grow the calisthenics community and everyone to have fun with moving their bodies. On that note, remember, don't take your training too seriously. Yes, there are some fundamentals and things that you want to achieve, and that is going to take time. But in the meantime, make sure that you enjoy it and have a little bit of fun. Get everybody involved in it, and definitely don't be too hard on yourself, because I promise you, you are making progress even if you don't feel like you are. All right, guys, I'm going to stop talking because this video is getting very, very long, and I will see you guys in the next video. I hope you have an amazing and beautiful day.